Hi, welcome to the broadcast today. I want to send a special shout out to my friend Mary, who may or may not be listening. I'll send her the replay regardless because she asked me today what my website was, uh, feeling a little nervous ahead of the impending end of the voting period, which midterm election day, November the 8th. And that's probably, if she watches the mainstream media, there's a lot of narratives on there about um, polls that show certain things. And I don't even like to stipulate what those polls show because my argument is that there's a muddied water of election narrative at the moment that the GOP is deliberately polluting with poor quality polls, uh, sampling sizes that and sampling choices that favor Republican outcomes in order to push the narrative that Republicans are winning. That either then they will choose to fall back on to say the election's been stolen if Democrats win, or they'll just use now as a strategy to try and depress Democratic turnout. And Republicans used to be able to rely on a lot of apathy or feeling of disenfranchisement, which for Democrats were probably a function associated with the Electoral College, so that people in blue states perhaps felt they didn't need to vote, and people in red states could have thought there was no point to them voting. It was this whole system that takes away from the idea of one voter and one vote, and instead changes it into a system which falsely sells itself on the idea of giving the little guys a shot against the big guys. But when you're talking about states and trying to compress everybody's vote into a number apportioned to their state, then you're disenfranchising voters in California who have millions more in population than, say, the state of Wyoming, but who nevertheless are disproportionately undervalued by the Electoral College system and indeed by the malapportionment that's part of the Senate composition. But that's a whole mouthful of highlighting problems with the composition of the American election system. Let's talk about the positives, because American democracy has some robustness to it that has made it, to a large degree, a shining light for other countries to look at and to draw strength from. Because economic strength is often derived from democratic strength. That is to say, China is on shaky economic grounds because of its totalitarian nature of government. You can't trust, and businesses can't put their trust as easily in a government that's less constrained by the rule of law and has more of a vested interest in towing a party line and trying to save face for an autocratic government. The elements of America that make it strong, or the elements of the United States that contribute significantly to its economic might, are the elements of accurate counting of votes, and an effort to include as many people as possible through the civil rights movement in the system of vote counting. The inclusion of women, and then eventually the inclusion of Black Americans as well. And I should say the re-inclusion, because after the Civil War, Black Americans could vote and could run for office, but were frequently then disenfranchised through different leaders in different states, forwarding a state constitution that actively designated them as second-class citizens without the right to vote or run for office. So the strength of American democracy, to have worked through some of those obstacles, to have acknowledged some of the problems with hereditary inherited rationalizations, and formalized constitutions that said only white people should be allowed to run for office or vote. America managed to reform some of its system and re-enfranchise Black voters and make democracy more inclusive and give democracy more of a robust basis on which to repel tyrants or dampen the aspirations of snake oil salesmen and women who have sought to game the system and achieve office. And it worked fairly well overall, worked better than in China in any case, was definitely the better type of outcome in a democratic sense. It gave power to the people. Leaders then had to impress on as many people as possible that they were genuinely working to advance the interests of the people. And that was useful. What we have now is a Republican Party that are telling their donors that they intend to wind back Medicaid, that they intend to wind back Social Security, to undercut them. I think the words used by Republican Senator Michael Lee in this secret video clip are pull it out. We'll have a listen because Michael Lee was captured live just the other day. Actually, this is from YouTube. But anyway, it's important. It's still Michael Lee on tape saying he wants to phase out Social Security, pull it up from the roots, get rid of it. And this is just supporting evidence, even if it's an old clip, because more recently, Senator Rick Scott had a 10-point plan that included sunsetting all legislation. Sunsetting meaning the legislation ends and then you have to go through the process of voting for it again and proposing it again if you want it to continue, i.e. destabilizing the continuance of Social Security and Medicaid. So let's have a listen, make it big on the screen. Listen very carefully to Michael Lee.
My objective to phase out Social Security, to pull it up by the roots. People who advise me politically always tell me that's dangerous, and I tell them, in that case, it's not worth my running. That's why I'm doing this. We'll get rid of that. Medicare and Medicaid are of the same sort and need to be pulled up.
They need to be pulled up.
My objective to phase out Social Security.
People are clapping.
People who advise me politically always tell me that's dangerous.
People who advise me politically always tell me that's dangerous. Yes, it is. That's why you're only saying it when you're secretly being recorded and you're not saying it to mainstream news reporters interviewing you.
I tell them, in that case, it's not worth my running. That's why I'm doing this.
That's why I'm doing this.
Medicare and Medicaid are of the same sort.
Medicare and Medicaid are of the same coin.
They need to be pulled up.
They need to be pulled up.
That's my objective, to phase out Social Security.
Let's listen again.
To phase out Social Security. My objective to phase out Social Security. To pull it up by the roots.
Some people aren't clapping. Some people are sitting there with their arms folded. This could be the reason. Hi, Christopher. Thanks for joining. I've got weak hair in my face and it's irritating me. But at the same time, I'm doing this to be personable and interesting, particularly to younger people, particularly to anybody who still needs to find the motivation to turn out to vote. If you don't watch normal media and you're prepared to listen to a lady in a pink wig or an Audrey costume from Descendants, I wore this on Halloween and I'm wearing it again because I want to attract the attention of people who don't listen to the Republican secret agenda. It's not even that secret. It's in the 10-point plan from Senator Rick Scott. You can find some reporting about it if you dig deep enough. The media isn't foregrounding it, just as they aren't foregrounding the threat to civilized society posed by Republicans who are increasingly embracing violence and making a mockery of the hospitalization, the significant life-threatening assault on Paul Pelosi, the husband of Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, by a radicalized right-wing supporter who believed the election was stolen from Donald Trump, that Democrats all lie, who intended to kneecap Nancy Pelosi with a hammer if she had been home that night. She wasn't home, only her husband was home. He managed to make it to the bathroom, press 911, put it on speakerphone and put it in his pocket and have a coded conversation in which he said that a man was in his house who he didn't know and he had a problem with it. So even when the attacker tried to defuse that 911 call and say, that everything was fine, Paul Pelosi said, I have a problem with it, but he says everything's fine. And it was enough to make that 911 operator recognize that this was a coded cry for help and to send a wellness check police crew to the Pelosi's home. And she was able to instigate that rescue of Paul Pelosi, although it was still relatively late in that the assailant was able to hit Paul Pelosi in the head with a hammer, leaving him unconscious for 3 minutes in a pool of his own blood, and then have to have brain surgery to, I guess, reduce swelling in his brain following on from that serious assault. And he remains in intensive care in hospital. Yes. So Christopher's enjoying the week. That's good. I hope everybody else is also enjoying the messaging, because it's very serious. Tell the people you know, particularly people who have relatives who will need, in this country, who will need Social Security, who will need Medicaid, because Republicans intend to get rid of it. That is their underlying objective. Rick Scott's been open about his desire to sunset this legislation, meaning retire it, and then it can be revoted on, i.e., we're not sure if that's good. Let's make it optional so we can just discuss it every 5 years. And Republicans with any degree of control in the legislative branch of government in the United States will pull it, as Mike Lee describes there. And I'm going to play that clip one more time, because we should all be so prepared to quote him to those we know, to have those difficult conversations with people and say, you might not realize this. This is a 2010 recording in which Mike Lee is being honest about this Republican agenda of defunding the benefits scheme into which working Americans have paid into their entire lives. As Obama memorably said recently, in recent days, people who have chapped hands, people who have bad knees, people who have sore backs from working hard jobs and paying into the Social Security fund their entire working lives, with the expectation of some decency in government to reward those people with what they are entitled to from a system of government that extracts an element from their paychecks to contribute to a fund that will reward them in their declining years with the payments they are now owed. And Republican presidents have taken from that Social Security fund to pay for wars such as the first war against Iraq by George W. Bush. The first one's George W. Bush. The second one's George H.W. Bush. I get my Bushes confused. Regardless, let's go back to, that was Mike Lee in 2010. Maybe we'll bring up Rick Scott's 10-point plan, because this was introduced. 11-point plan. Okay, Rick Scott's 11-point plan. Rick Scott's 11-point plan showcases the Republican brain. Okay. That's reporting by Esquire. Maybe I want to find something more reputable. But yes, Scott has a track record of running a company accused of one of the largest healthcare frauds in history. His company was accused of stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from Medicare. Or was it millions? All right. Well, we won't use that Esquire article because it's a little bit too colloquial, but we'll use a Yahoo Finance plan. All right. And then I can share that on screen, which is important. Yes, you can see my children's toys in the background. Oh, good. Christopher's got some very promising news that a lot of employees have been expressing their concern about what is to come of Social Security. So that's good. Democratic voters are increasingly aware of this. And the great thing about that is that it is fueling voter turnout. So the demographic that is having the largest share of early voting in Nevada at the moment has been Democratic registered voters over the age of 75. So in as much as Republicans and Republican-leaning media can fuel concern about inflation, which is happening globally, they understand that it is more of a real threat to their future comfort that Republicans intend to do away with their entitlements. So here, am I sharing this yet? Yes, I'm sharing this. Let's make it larger. Okay, so Christopher says employees have been expressing concern, and he works for one of the largest school districts in Arizona. That's interesting. August notes that I warned you 2 years ago that we were moving towards fascism. Yes, on the Periscope medium that is now closed down. And now fascist is an everyday term here now. It makes me feel like I did my job in helping normalize use of the term fascism to accurately denounce the direction, the tenor, the tone, the actions of those in the Republican Party. And I'll call them the Trump-led Republican Party because he currently leads them, but others in the Republican Party have fascist tendencies in their histories as well. So he definitely didn't invent Republican-themed fascism, but he did intensify it. He did exploit and amplify those fascistic tendencies. He emboldened use of racist rhetoric and hate speech as a political tool to spread the contagion and the empowerment of cruelty. Because unifying together to denounce a common enemy is empowering. It's not a good use of empowerment. It's a very ugly, it's a very destructive use of empowerment to have people intoxicated on the moral clarity of falsely castigating people for being migrants who are just fleeing adverse circumstances, or trans people who are trying to live authentic lives in a gender fluid framing that they've adopted. Yes. I mean, part of my adoption of the wig today is I'm intending it as support for trans people, because I know that not only trans people will be harmed by all of this anti-trans sentiment pushed by exploitative Republican strategists, right-wing strategists, but women are harmed too, because if you look perhaps performatively feminine rather than organically feminine, according to anti-trans people, they will harass you. So women have been harassed in bathrooms because an observer has thought that's not a real woman, that's a trans woman, and I don't believe they have the right to use this bathroom, and I believe that I have the right to harass and intimidate them in order to persuade them to leave and to validate my own belief in my righteous anti-trans indignation. So I try and spread this to a lot of my feminist friends who are often all too easily persuaded to hop on the anti-trans bandwagon out of a misguided protectiveness towards girls in sports. Because I can agree with them that you should protect girls in sports, but I also believe that in a big picture sense, there is a far more real threat to all women in sports and all women existing in the world generally. Our physical safety is under threat because, and many women are in physical danger right now because of Republicans who have been put into office on the back of anti-trans panic, on the back of anti-LGBTQ panic and pro-parental choice, faux parental choice panic that gives Republicans the power to tie the hands of doctors and health professionals who are treating very real medical conditions that afflict thousands and hundreds of thousands of women around the world and thousands of women in America. All the time, because women have miscarriages, women have much wanted pregnancies that where the zygote or the fetus is dying, and they need help to have that pregnancy terminated before their body succumbs to sepsis. But Republican legislation ties doctors' hands until a woman is closer, visibly closer to death, which makes it more of a gamble. We have to wait till she's close to death, but then have we left it too late? Can we save her life in time? It is Russian roulette with the lives of women, and all women need to be able to push back against the slut-shaming intentions of the Republican Party. They're trying to piggyback or scaffold off the pre-existing revulsion for sexually liberated women that they feel. They're using that as a stepping as a ladder to gain more power to just jeopardize the lives of women and the lives of girls, because girls who become pregnant, whether voluntarily or a result of coercion or violence, young women are at the risk of significant medical complications, because our bodies are better able to cope with pregnancy during a certain time frame, and that doesn't include the preteen years. So preteens who get pregnant, young girls who get pregnant, are at higher risk for preeclampsia and tearing, as well as emotional disturbance. So yes, I'm going to put up August's comment for a second, because I'm going to say, yes, this is what I did. Thank you for saying that, because it's encouraging for me to feel that my warnings were timely then, and I'm repeating those warnings now, because if the more Republicans that get access to power in Congress, this current midterm elections, the more women who will lose their lives, the more democracy will be jeopardized by having election denialists in office, because they're denialists of elections, not just of Trump's election loss. They deny that elections can be fair. They will accept stage-managed elections in which they win, and any other election result is to be challenged and to be opposed until they get their own way, until they get the only election result they can accept, which is their own win. And that is not functional democracy. That is staged managed democracy. That is performative democracy only. Bob also notes that he was able to get his nephew and 24 of his friends registered and to vote blue. They are in their late 20s. Late 20s or late 29s? I'm going to guess late 20s. And that's wonderful news, Bob. Everybody should be adopting your strategy, registering young people, although it may be too late to register in some states. There'll be some states where you can perhaps register on the day. And I should make it my business to share that, because, okay, let's do it now. Let's look up which states here are the states you can still register to vote. Okay, it's a CBS News article. I trust it. There are 19 states and also the District of Columbia where voters can register and vote all on election day. 6 of those states are considered battleground states, meaning their results could determine which candidates. Yeah. So are they talking about... So this reporting is from November the 3rd, 2020. I prefer midterm election. Midterms. Okay, yes, here's, if you haven't registered to vote, here are the states where. November the 1st, 2022. This is good. I don't want 2020 election voting. That's regards to presidential election, and we need something. Okay. And it's a bunch of ads. Yahoo News, I do not want a bunch of ads. Okay, find it. Okay, so the last day of the 2022 midterm elections is Tuesday, November the 8th, which is election day. Whilst voter registration has closed in many states, some offer same-day in-person voter registration. In 17 states and the District of Columbia, voters can register and cast their ballot at the same time. Okay, these states: Colorado, Connecticut, the District of Columbia, Delaware, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Vermont, Washington, and Wyoming all allow voters to register on election day. So I think some of the critical states would be Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico. Yep. Do you know what? All of those states. So I'm going to put this on screen. But first, we better go through that thing I already had on screen, which is Rick Scott's agenda. Let's go through this quickly, and then we'll go through the states where you can still encourage people you know to register to vote. So this is Yahoo Finance. Senate Republican leaders have made it clear they aren't interested in detailing their plans if they win control of Congress in the midterm elections. Asked last month what his party's agenda would be, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, dodged. That is a very good question, he said, and I'll let you know when we take it back. So you can see from that statement the degree of protection. Hey, Eric, nice to see you. The degree of protection afforded to Republican officials by the media because they feel that they can dodge that comfortably, that a journalist will not be insistent. No, before voters vote for you, you must be transparent about your policy agenda. You must tell us what you will do. Nope, they said, we'll tell you when we win. That was a statement from Mitch McConnell. And the fact that they can get away with that dodge, that he's comfortable to give that dodge, shows you that the media is not operating to the level it needs to as a fourth estate, as a critical pillar of democracy. They are not asking, they are not getting, and they're not asking insistently enough for transparency from Republican politicians about what they intend to do in office. So Senator Rick Scott of Florida, who chairs the National Republican Senatorial Committee, apparently has a different view. So he did not dodge. He released, and this apparently really annoyed Mitch McConnell, but Senator Rick Scott released an 11.31 page plan laying out the conservative agenda he'd want to pursue if Republicans win Senate and House majorities this year and the White House in 2024. The plan is heavy on culture war controversies and traditional right-wing talking points. Blah, blah, blah. He proposes dramatic cuts to the federal government and calls for cutting the government workforce by 25 in 5 years. Many government agencies should be either moved out of Washington or shuttered entirely, his plan says. Washington Post columnist Jennifer Rubin notes that the plan lacks any proposal to bring down inflation, even though Republicans have been hollering about it for months, has no plans, no proposal to increase wages or reduce income inequality, no proposals to prepare workers for the 21st century economy, no proposal to provide relief from tariffs, which are a form of tax, and no proposals to increase school performance on basic subjects. And the proposed cuts will not be popular with anyone who visits national parks, who relies on federal law enforcement, who needs Social Security, a tax refund, or thinks we need a strong national defense. Yeah, so it's the same makers versus takers logic. The idea that poor people in America need to pay more and need to receive less, disregarding the degree to which Americans have paid blood, sweat, and tears, but more literally money, into Social Security funds for decades of their lives. Taken as a whole, Rubin says the agenda reveals that the GOP is not a political party with ideas to improve the lives of Americans. It's a frightful expression of white grievance and contempt for the intelligence of voters. And it confirms what we have long suspected. Republicans don't lack an agenda. They're just shy about revealing how unpopular it is. Yeah. Still not really reporting on the idea to sunset all legislation. Come on, media. What if I type in the word sunset? Northeast Public Radio. Well, thank you, Northeast Public Radio. They have presented something. Okay. Senator Rick Scott wants to sunset Social Security and Medicare. Published April 15, 2022. By now, many listeners have probably seen Senator Rick Scott, Republican, Florida, on television trying to deny what is in his infamous 11-point plan to rescue America. One example that he tries to deny is in the section on government. Buried on page 19 of the 31 PDF of the plan is a very significant promise. I believe it is worth the time and perhaps waves of disgust that will accompany this reading. Check out the 31-page PowerPoint of Scott's alleged rescue plan. You can access it here. All right. Here is the language from page 19. All federal legislation sunsets in 5 years. If a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again. See, just get rid of all legislation after 5 years. So you'd have 5 more years worth of access to Social Security before Republicans controlling Congress decide it's not worth keeping. Sunset. Now, amongst the many federal laws on the books is a law called the Social Security Act. It was originally passed in 1935 to create unemployment insurance, aid to dependent children, which was cash welfare for widows and orphans, later extended to cover all poor single women with children, renamed Aid to Families with Dependent Children, AFDC, and Old Age and Survivors Pensions, what is commonly thought of today as Social Security. Since then, the law has been amended many times and expanded dramatically. So they basically think widows and orphans, old age pensioners and survivors, families with dependent children, their lives are all too cushy. Surely the economy would be better if we shut down payments to these people and they couldn't spend any money on anything. That would boost the economy, right? It wouldn't boost the economy. It would boost the tax cuts for their wealthy donors, because the Republican Party is a lobbying group for the most unprincipled wealthy people in American society. Not all wealthy people are unprincipled, but those that are donate to the Republican Party in order to ease their contribution back to the society that scaffolded their rise to the top, and harm the widows and orphans and pensioners and people with dependent children as a consequence. What they feel to be a just form of survival of the fittest. They honestly want to wind back any government-mandated help to people in need, because for them, that's an unjust framing of the world. They should be allowed to keep all of the money they earned without having to pay tax on it, because to their mind, they are special. Their individual accomplishments are entirely due to themselves and have nothing to do with the scaffolded greatness of American society. That is to say, the taxation money that was formerly taken from wealthy people and invested in infrastructure, roads, airports, public transport systems, federal police, firefighting establishments, all of the scaffolding of modern society, public schools that have enabled people to get a good education, enough of an education to have skill sets so that America could have this functional, progressive, forward-looking society where people were able to update their skill levels, attend community college, using the reading and writing skills that they acquired in a robust primary, you don't call it primary, here you call it elementary, middle, and high school education. They don't want people to have adequate high school levels of education. They want people to have restricted skill sets that make them more dependent on compensation for serf-level labor. And when I say serf, I'm using the term SERF, from the whole system of feudalism, where you had lords who owned the land and these dependent little serfs, not little in stature, but little in an income sense, who would have to fight for the lord of the manor, who would be so dependent on for their ability to survive and feed their family and whatever scraps they were allowed to keep for themselves after laboring themselves into an early grave from working themselves to death in order to benefit the person who owned the land that they lived on. And a lot more besides. So that type of feudalism is endgame for Republicans. And for the Republican donors, I should say, the unprincipled billionaires who use Citizens United Act to funnel billions of dollars. And I have some of that graphed, actually. We'll go back to Twitter because somebody very obligingly documented some of what American billionaires have done recently. We can look at some of the names of people funneling huge amounts of money. Oh, and also look, Republican lobbyists, Republican politicians who are lobbyists for gun manufacturers, lobbyists for their other donors. Extreme Republican gun laws passed in Texas has led to a spike in violent crime, 44% increase in gun deaths under Governor Abbott. 74% of Texans actually oppose permitless carry laws, but too many voters in Texas are still voting for Abbott because of that false idea, the false framing that Republicans are pro-business. They're not pro-business, they're pro-vulture capitalism. And Americans who grew up in an era where you were either totalitarian communists or you could choose wholehearted embrace of capitalism, those were the two options. And that led to sometimes an overly mentally generous approach to business, in which you say business shouldn't be regulated. You should vote Republican because they're against business regulation. Business should be free from regulation in order to thrive as a viable alternative to communism, which can truthfully be characterized as a system which appeals to idiot idealists who haven't ever looked at history and seen what has happened to every single society that has enough idealists to embrace communism, whilst neglecting the fact that it involves consolidating power in the hands of a central elite without checks and balances and leads to violent repression, mass re-education in camps of people who aren't on board with how wonderful communism is, and often mass man-manufactured famines and mass death in the terms of tens of millions of people under every single communist government that has transpired in the history of the world. So it's not a tenable political system, but you don't have to overcompensate in your rejection of communism to say, rightio, let's have unfettered worship of business and unconstrained operation of corporate executives, because that's also dangerous. And tens of millions of people die as a consequence of unmitigated global heating because unprincipled corporate executives have sought so effectively to deceive the public as to the dire need for climate mitigation strategies. And the truth has seeped out enough into the general consciousness that more people now are on board with the need to address the burning of fossil fuels, to address sources of releasing carbon and other climate gases, heating gases into the atmosphere that trap the sun's rays, that allow the sun's rays to penetrate through the layer and to dissipate and warm the earth, but not escape, gradually increasing the temperature of the world so that we have increasingly moist air, which lends the world to increasingly frequent and severe disastrous weather events, more storms, more intense storms, more droughts, more fires as a consequence, more hurricanes, more tornadoes, more everything that displaces people, that ruins people's lives, that submerses their properties, their possessions, their livelihoods in water, in fire, in dust, in violent disruption. And that's one of the consequences we're dealing with of the false presentation of politics as a binary choice between deadly communism and vulture capitalism. But yes, dangerous gun laws in Texas. Texans oppose the permitless carry laws, but it's still, Governor Abbott still continues to relax gun laws even more because it supercharges the identity of his most rabid supporters. And when the more rabid and outspoken they get, sometimes the more discouraged and disheartened non-Abbott supporters get, Democrats get. So thank God for Beto O'Rourke, who has the ability, who has a sufficient mastery of the English language that he can resurrect the morale of Democrats in Texas. And I don't know if it will be enough. I pray that it will. I pray that enough voters in Texas look around at the devastation wrought by permitless carry laws, the contributing factor of these laws to gun violence. So the individuals who take up those guns and go hunting and go and hunt innocent children and teenagers in schools, that is their individual choice. They are morally culpable for it. But the proliferation of guns caused by the relaxing of requirements. Imagine if there was a governor who said, oh, in my state, we're so free. My commitment to freedom is so pronounced that I've made driver's licenses no longer required in this state. Anybody can drive a car because I believe in freedom. If you're over 18, you can drive a car. You don't have to have any lessons. There's no requirement. You can choose to have lessons if you want. It's all about choice and freedom. Sure. Would you feel safe as a Texan driving on those roads? No. You wouldn't. You wouldn't feel safe if they abandoned all of the legislative structure centered around the goal of public safety, because we're all members of the public. This is a donut shop called the Donut Hole in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was firebombed after it hosted a drag show, which is a predictable outcome of the stochastic terrorism, yes, incited by Tucker Carlson, an account on TikTok called Libs of TikTok. Is it on Twitter or TikTok? Libs of TikTok, Christopher Rufo, a Republican strategist, and conservative commentator Matt Walsh. So they're stirring moral panics to cultivate a devoted political base. Hey. So that was a person in a red hat, which resembles a MAGA hat. There's white lettered writing on the hat, and he's putting in a note and then hitting the door with a baseball bat to break some glass. Yep, and once he's broke the glass, he lights his Molotov cocktail and throws it in the establishment. And this is anti-trans violence, but it's I don't know if it's reminiscent to you, but to me it's reminiscent of Kristallnacht in Germany, where people felt emboldened to break the windows of Jewish businesses as an expression of unity in condemnation, and unity in violent expression of that condemnation. So breaking the windows of Jewish businesses was a relatively early sign of intensifying violence that followed. So then it wasn't just breaking the windows of Jewish businesses, it was breaking the skulls of Jewish citizens of Germany. So if you're a feminist and you resent trans people, reconsider your false adoption of that term. It's not feminist to be anti-trans. Just as a Jewish person, if I were to say that I reject converts to this religion, I mean, I'm a secular Jew myself, but if I was to say I can't abide Jewish converts, they're interlopers, that would be disgusting of me, because you should be able to convert to a religion. And similarly, if you are very committed to the idea of being sufficiently so gender fluid that you change your gender presentation during the course of your life. You can affect your biology, you can take actions, you can affect what you wear. I will not call you an interloper. I will not allow people to say hateful things about you. I will not stand back and let my silence be a brick in the wall of violence, increasing violence targeted against you and against businesses that support you and against communities that support children, or against hospitals where children can receive medical care if they feel that they have serious gender dysmorphia. I know you can have body dysmorphia. So is it called gender dysmorphia? Anyway, I'm prepared to speak up for hospitals that are having death threats sent to them and bomb threats sent to them for having the audacity to treat children who want medical treatment. And I want that to be done personally. I would like that to be done with all due care and safeguards taken, because starting hormones is a consequential step to take. But I will not stand idly by while people rile up hate rhetoric against medical professionals for daring to treat children who claim they need treatment. And it is time. We are at a historical crossroads where, if you can't see the similarities between the incitement of violence against Jewish people and the current incitement of violence against trans children and trans adults by Republican legislators and Republican commentators who are claiming to be protecting women with one hand, but putting women in physical danger by tying the hands of health professionals to help treat them for ectopic pregnancies, for incomplete miscarriages, for hemorrhaging. Women are being sent home bleeding from hospitals in Republican-controlled states where anti-abortion legislation has passed because they are not sufficiently close to death for their pressing medical condition to receive appropriate treatment. Doctors need choice, and doctors are having their hands tied. That the appropriate care of women has become contentious. Oh, I got weak hair in my mouth. But thank you for listening to me. Still haven't got down to what I wanted to get down to. Oh, the Fed. This is not the Federal Reserve Bank. Thinks. So the president of the Kansas City branch of the Federal Reserve Bank says that they are raising interest rates to solve a problem of Americans having too much money. And this is a quote from Esther George, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. We see today that there is a bit of a savings buffer still sitting for households that may allow them to continue to spend in a way that keeps demand strong. That suggests we may have to keep at this for a while. So the Federal Reserve Bank is trying to make people have less money because they think that's what's causing inflation. When they could take their heads out of their butts and go, there's inflationary pressures around the world. Russia launched a war of invasion against Ukraine that is gumming up the works of exporting grain from Ukraine, and Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. That's affecting food prices. That's having rollover effects to a lot of other industries, and inflation results. You can't address the problem of rising costs due to export blockages resulting from Russia's imperialist, fascist, totalitarian, aggressive decisions to invade a neighboring country and slaughter men, women, and children there, and destroy homes, cause rolling blackouts, all in the name of territorial expansion. under a false cover of, well, Ukrainians are Nazis. Too many Nazis control Ukraine. So we're going to help them by just killing a lot of people and raping a lot of people and stealing a lot of their homes and washing machines and just bombing a lot of them into oblivion. And that will help them get rid of Nazis. No, the Russians are the Nazi equivalent in Ukraine. They are the deceitful, hate rhetoric espousing nightmare government that's trying to build up their reputation for being strong at the expense of the innocent people of Ukraine. So, yeah, the Federal Reserve raising interest rates in order to deal with that problem in that way is falsely victimizing the people of America. Biden gave a good speech, and he noted that this violence against Democrats, Republicans, and nonpartisan officials just doing their jobs are the consequence of lies told for power and profit. In this moment, we have to confront those lies with the truth. We're facing a defining moment. Let's listen to Biden for 1 minute and 24 seconds.
Election workers like Shay Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman, were harassed and threatened just because they had the courage to do their job and stand up for the truth, to stand up for our democracy. This institution, this intimidation, this violence against Democrats, Republicans, and nonpartisan officials just doing their jobs are the consequence of lies told for power and profit, lies of conspiracy and malice, lies repeated over and over to generate a cycle of anger, hate, vitriol, and even violence. In this moment, we have to confront those lies with the truth. The very future of our nation depends on it. My fellow Americans, we're facing a defining moment, an inflection point.
Ooh, an inflection
We must,
point.
with one overwhelming, unified voice, speak as a country and say there's no place for voter intimidation or political violence in America, whether it's directed at Democrats or Republicans. No place, period. No place ever.
All right, so that was good. Thank you, Biden. Beautiful speech. Oops. Nope. And let's remember the alternative from the Republican Party is Mike Lee saying, my objective is to phase out Social Security, pull it up by the roots and get rid of it. People who advise me politically always tell me that. That's why I'm doing this, to get rid of that. Medicare and Medicaid are the same sort. You need to be pulled up. Okay. So make sure your friends and family know that. Believe them when they say. Oh, this is something else I wanted to note. Congratulations to 79-year-old Democrats of Clark County. You have voted more than anyone anywhere else so far, with a 61% turnout so far. This is in Nevada. Clark County, which is a blue stronghold, they need to build up a firewall in Clark County to forestall against strong GOP turnout. And there is likely to be strong GOP turnout on election day in the midterms. They're fired up because they have been lied to about who is to blame for inflation and how to best address it. It won't fix the economy. It will massively harm the economy if Republicans gain office, because they are heavily incentivized to make the economy worse in order to motivate their base to vote out President Biden. Elections in America, voting is voluntary. Turnout is a significant part of winning an election. And if you, what is the saying? I think it's Voltaire. If you can make someone believe absurdities, you can make them commit atrocities. And it is an atrocity to vote for Republicans who constantly make America less safe for our children, who are inflicting emotional terrorism on the children of America, who have to go to school in a climate where Republicans continue to sabotage action to constrain gun distribution. If you vote for Republicans, you are voting for an expansion of crime, because crime follows on from more and more people having guns in their hands. More 18-year-olds having legal access to guns means more 18-year-olds leaving guns in their car where they can be easily stolen, and contribute to criminals having a high number of guns in their possession, guns that they then use to commit more crimes. Bob is saying that he saw a study from Princeton that tracks voters that supported or didn't support bills. It didn't matter what we want. The graph line stayed steady in the middle. Well, yes, Republicans don't have to be responsive to what the public wants, because they rely on their ability to mesmerize their own supporters with false framing of villains. They can frame migrants as being villains. They can exploit people's tribalistic tendencies, which have been often supported by Christian theologians in the United States who helped rationalize slavery, and in the years following used the pulpit to help rationalize depriving Black Americans of their rights as citizens, helped rationalize attacks on Black Americans. So there is a culpability in parts of the Christian church in order to cement power as being, I guess, the religion of inherent white righteousness. And there is a culpability in the silence of others who have let white Christian nationalists gain such a powerful footing in American politics, so that they can advance their cause of eliminating the separation between church and state in the United States, in sharp opposition to the wishes of the founding parents of America, who understood the need to preserve that distinction, church-state, to keep them separate in order to avoid the bloody wars that afflicted various nations around the world, in which different religious sects fought violently against each other in an assertion of rightness. No, my religion's right, so you must die because you're a heretic. No, my religion's right, you must all die because you are heretics. You are the true heretics. No, you are the true heretics. Let's all fight bloody, long-standing wars against each other to determine whose imaginary anxiety-relieving worldviews should triumph. Because religion should soothe anxiety, religion should comfort, religion should highlight virtues such as the virtue of looking after your community, the virtue of mitigating selfishness with a commitment to others, be they people in your family and people in your community and your society. Religion should be an upholder of good, but instead religion is often an upholder of rightness of ideas. And our ideas are often very fanciful. So people can fight over which imaginary God is heretical and which imaginary God is the one true God. And human beings have a vast capacity to fight over the rightness of their imaginary ideas. They have a vast capacity to go to their deaths insisting on the rightness of their own ideas. People who were COVID denialists and picked up that misinformation from social media or from the radio or from Tucker Carlson or from Laura Ingraham went to their deaths in hospitals saying, COVID is made up. I can't possibly have COVID. You should just fix whatever else is wrong with me because COVID is a hoax. There were people who saw the light and asked to be vaccinated on their deathbeds in hospital. And the sad medical professionals had to tell them, it is too late for you. I cannot vaccinate you now. Vaccination is to prime your immune system with a pre-infection warning. You are no longer pre-infection. You have the infection and your body is shutting down. And that's not to say that only people who are unvaccinated die from the condition. Because of the low uptake of Americans of the vaccine, people who are vulnerable, people who are immunized but still vulnerable, have still died from COVID and continue to die from COVID. This disease has too much ascendancy in the United States because of the actions of Donald Trump and his cohort of liars who eroded the public trust in public health measures, who eroded people's capacity to believe the truth, that COVID is a dangerous disease and that we protect each other all by taking precautions against its spread in our communities, in our society, in our country, in our world. I'm going to go away now and try and write a rap, because lovely is to talk to people on the internet. I want to talk on TikTok, which Bob always recommends to me. And I see now, I've seen it for a while, but I have not felt emboldened to go there because Twitter is my space where I'm established. I am an unknown entity on TikTok, but I still agree with him that I should use whatever capacity I have to generate content, to try and generate content with a potential appeal to young people. I realize now people get their news from TikTok as well. I didn't realize how much there has arisen whole news channels on TikTok, that people just use it like Facebook used to be used, as a one-stop shop to get social connection, their imaginations titillated, and even news and framing of the world. So I want to help activate, if there's any young person out there in the states that still have same-day voter registration and voting, to alert them to the urgency of this moment, that election denialists in office is a surefire way to have people who are more loyal to Trump than to the United States, who are more loyal to Trump's wishes than to the people of the United States, to the economy of the United States. Because when democracy is undermined, business, the stature of American business is undermined. And the American businesses are successful in a world context because of the reliability and the enduring nature of American democracy. So you weaken that democracy, you bring that to an end. You haven't just lost some idealistic good quality, you've lost the foundation of your strong economy. And the American economy is still strong. The Californian economy is the fourth largest economy in the world. Not the American economy, just the Californian economy. Do you understand what that means about the might of California as an economic engine unto itself? And California is the home of migrants in the United States, many, many migrants. It's an ultra diverse state in which people have flocked because of the strength of American democracy, the commitment of Americans to being fair and kind and welcoming. And that commitment was undermined by Donald Trump amongst lots of people, but other people have strengthened in opposition to Trump's actions. Other people have recommitted to democracy and recommitted to those American ideals of tolerance, inclusiveness, welcoming those fleeing from oppression or those seeking the foundations of a good life for their families, the foundations of a stable existence on which they can initiate a business, provide an education for their children, find pathways up the social ladder that don't just benefit themselves, but that bring benefits in attendance alongside their own entrepreneurial spirit, their own devotion to education, their own devotion to flexibility. People who are willing to move to America, to leave behind their roots, their connections to a different country, are people who have a lot to offer. California has benefited from that. California and the migrants who live there have been the engine of substantial economic growth and have brought in substantial economic benefits to the United States. Christopher says there's a ton of new stuff on TikTok, both young and older there. I just want to go where the young people are. Obama knows you have to meet people at their level. You have to meet people where they are. Christopher notes that you will find historic resources to back up your political insights as well. It's true. I think Bob sent me a TikTok video in which a man explained one of the founding mothers of America, Elizabeth Freeman, whose original name was Mom Bet, who sold as a 6-month-old, sold again as a young girl to Colonel Ainsley and his wife. She was abused. She was hit with a hot shovel that had been used to shovel coals in a fireplace as she stood in front of another young female to protect her from a blow from Colonel Ainsley's wife. And she left that wound, that burn on her arm untreated and unbandaged in order to have it a visible reminder of the cruelty and mistreatment of her owner, her female owner, the mistress of that house. And when she was present to overhear the discussions preceding the writing of the Sheffield Declaration, which was the Massachusetts Constitution, and was used as material for the Declaration of Independence, which followed after that. She was present. She overheard some of those idealistic statements about life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. She was present for some of those considerations being made about the need for all men to be free, to have the opportunity to make choices, to not be enslaved by unfair conditions. And she had the wisdom to apply this to herself and to say, she had the audacity of hope to say, why shouldn't that apply to me? Why must I be deprived of my liberty in this way? Why must I be a slave whose children are sold, whose family can maintain no cohesion and no unity because we are designated to be but objects and the property of others? Where is my human dignity? And she was able to persuade one of the lawyers present for those conversations and the writing of that Sheffield Declaration, Thomas Sedgwick, to have him launch a case on her behalf to claim that Colonel Ainsley inappropriately was possessing human beings. And Colonel Ainsley lost that case. So he lost ownership of Elizabeth Freeman. She won her own freedom from that case. Multiple other cases then made it to court as a consequence, and Massachusetts then included in its constitution an end to the legality of slavery in the state of Massachusetts. And it took 83 years for the rest of America to finally catch up to that innovation in Massachusetts, that moral resolve to recognize the abhorrent practice of enslaving others as truly abhorrent and so necessarily illegal. And that was a really valuable thing I learned. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everybody who's recommended TikTok to me. And it was very inspiring. Speaking of inspiring, before I go, I'd like to quickly say also that I was able to see Kamala Harris in person, Vice President Kamala Harris. Hiccup. Vice President Kamala Harris, Senator Ayanna Pressley, Governor candidate Maura Healey, Mayor Wu of Boston, candidate for Attorney General Andrea Campbell, a candidate for State Auditor Danielle DeZoglio. All of these amazing women spoke, and the Vice President spoke very powerfully about the threat to democracy and how it's consequential not just for the United States, but for the world. Because citizens of oppressed repressive countries look to America, look to the example of a democracy that is flourishing. And the more that democracy is undermined, the more they lose hope, the more the tyrants that are the bane of the lives of citizens in other nations are emboldened to undermine their or to stamp out any fledgling efforts to revive democracy in those nations. I'm thinking of Russia, I'm thinking of Venezuela, I'm thinking of Iran, I'm thinking of China. People can access the internet. There's visibility. The eyes of the world are on America. And if we allow Republicans in office who are Trump loyal, who don't follow the rule of law, who follow the rule of Trump, who follow the wishes of Trump, and they see it as just and right to give elections to Trump because they believe his lies that things were stolen from him. So they will break the law in an effort to do what they now think is just, to restore what was stolen to Trump. They will throw away legitimate votes. They will improperly count election results because they are committed to a cult leader, to the Jim Jones of the Republican Party, who has sold lies and who has been assisted in selling lies by the microphone of Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, and Sean Hannity, and those who populate right-wing radio, and Matt Walsh and Christopher Rufo, who have led the charge of framing trans people as being a threat to democracy and a threat to societal fabric. Yes. So I better go. I did say I'm going to go try and write poetry, raps, anything I can. Maybe just poetry. Maybe I'll do my best. I'm going to go be creative for half an hour and see how I go. Thank you so much for listening. I always find everybody else's commitment to justice, to democracy, to the will of the people, and the will of the people, the clear-eyed will of the people, people who haven't been brainwashed to hate public health, who haven't been brainwashed to hate gay people, who haven't been brainwashed to think that Donald Trump is the savior of the world and who is the only person addressing child trafficking, when Donald Trump is likely involved, or was likely at some point in his life involved with child trafficking as a very wealthy and unprincipled person. And when I say very wealthy, I don't mean a successful businessman, but someone who was able to effectively steal money from banks and effectively steal money from unearned government tax breaks and effectively steal money from the IRS by falsely representing his assets, to keep multiple sets of accounting books in order to game the system in America as much as possible. So not good at running a business, but good at gaming the system, good at self-marketing in a way that made mom and pop investors send him money that he then kept for himself, because he doesn't make good investments. He doesn't know how to generate value. He knows how to create a pyramid scheme of Donald Trump in which he sells the concept of Trump's success and pretends that it's contagious and will rub off, his golden touch will rub off on you, whereas really he will keep your gold. You will send him your gold and he will keep it. And that is the model of his success. He will keep it and he will buy a gold toilet for himself to titillate the public imagination and inspire journalists to visit him and write gullibly of his apparent wealth and and feed into the mythology of Donald Trump's business success. Yeah. This could be a good poem. To help disabuse some people. But the point is, my task right now is not really to disabuse Trump supporters, because that requires a lot. My point is to motivate Americans of all ages to turn out, but particularly young people, because they're already halfway there. They already see the need to protect their own rights. They already see that their rights as women are on the chopping block, but the rights of families are on the chopping block. It's not just women who make family planning decisions. The buck stops with women, but it's families who make joint decisions about how many children they can sustainably care for, how many children they have the financial and emotional resources to bring into this world. What kind of family support do they have? It's not easy to bring up children. You need, particularly when they're little, but that's all I know about. I'm sure it has other hardships associated with children as they get older. To take that ability out of the hands of families and to say, yeah, you didn't, this is accidental pregnancy, but, or there's complications with your pregnancy, but this is now a government mandated pregnancy. So sorry, you can't have any medical input about your life. We're going to play Russian roulette with your health and continuing existence. You've got a cancer diagnosis, you'd like to end your pregnancy. Sorry, your continuing existence is now subordinate to the continuing existence of the zygote, which also has a low chance of survival given that you've got a cancer diagnosis. But we're going to spin that chamber and press that trigger with your life, because you must on no account have a medically necessary termination of your pregnancy so that you can receive chemotherapy or radiation treatment. We are going to spin the chamber and play Russian roulette with your life. And that is the Republican promise to women today. Lindsey Graham has been clear that he wishes that he will introduce a 15-week national ban on abortion. And he thinks it sounds reasonable, 15 weeks. A lot of things can go wrong after 15 weeks of pregnancy. There are a lot of women who begged their families not to take them to a Catholic hospital because they wanted their lives to be saved, and they knew a Catholic hospital might have doctors who felt constrained and could not deliver the medical treatment necessary to save their lives because it contradicted the core tenets of a Catholic hospital. There are lots of women around the country who, when pressed, can probably tell you a story of a pregnancy complication or a pregnancy scare or a miscarriage that they had to have a DNC for, or a dilation and evacuation, a medically necessary procedure to save the life of a woman with an incomplete miscarriage, a woman who still has fetal material left in her uterus, but and it's called an abortion to take that fetal material out. The pregnancy's over. It's not a viable growing baby anymore, and it's a sad and tragic circumstance. But the uterus can get septic if you leave decomposing human tissue inside a woman's uterus. And without an abortion, to take that material out, it's DNA, it's still termed an abortion, and it all becomes medically contentious, or becomes legally contentious as medical treatment if you let Republicans have any control over the House or the Senate. Any control, any vote for a Republican is now a vote to endanger the physical safety and the physical health of hundreds of women in your state, and thousands of women if you put it all together, and tens of thousands of women if you put it all together, whose lives will be in danger from an ectopic pregnancy or from, yes, Trisha is here, Dr. Savita Halappanavar. Yes, I remember her. So last Friday was the 10th anniversary of her death. Her death was a motivating factor for millions of people of Ireland to vote on a referendum in favor of expanding access to legal abortion for the people of Ireland, for the women of Ireland, because she lost her life because of the compunction of treating medical professionals in a hospital where she had a dying fetus inside her body, where the fetal heartbeat was still faintly detectable of this dying unborn child. And it was a wanted child, it was a wanted pregnancy, but she knew she would have a chance to have another pregnancy, to bring a child into the world, if she could get an abortion now of this pregnancy now that was already dying, that was no longer viable. There was no way this baby was going to safely arrive into the world. She was 19 weeks pregnant. The unborn child was dying. The fetus was dying. They could not treat her. They could detect a fetal heartbeat. The considerations of keeping her alive were secondary to refraining from interfering with that dying heartbeat. And she had a heart attack from the sepsis taking over her body as a consequence of the refusal by doctors operating in a Catholic hospital at that time, Catholic influenced legal system that made it illegal for them to give her an abortion before they thought her life was significantly at risk. So they played with her life, and she died. She had a heart attack. She was in her 30s. She wanted to have a child, but they put that pregnancy, a non-viable pregnancy, because this is what happens when the government's interfering in the ability of doctors to treat women for the medical conditions they present with. And she lost her life. It is now the 10th anniversary of her death, 31 years old. Thank you. Twitcherooby-doo. Thank you, Twitcherooby-doo. Bob says, say hey to Mr. Dav. I will. I am so glad you brought up Savita. She was a stunningly beautiful woman, and her face is painted on murals around Ireland to honor her life that was stolen from her as a consequence of a failure to achieve separation between church and state at that time in Ireland. So they've gone on to prize some of the Catholic Church's teachings out of Ireland's laws so that women can have unconstrained access to medical care needed to save their lives, to preserve their fertility. Because a lot of women who don't obtain abortions when it's medically necessary to do so will go on to have their fertility impacted. There will be problems with their uterus. They won't be able to have children going forwards. And this is a consequence that pro-life people would say, oh, it's unfortunate. It's collateral damage to their foregrounding of prioritizing a zygote and deprioritizing the actual lives of actual sentient women, actual sentient human girls. Because of the introduction of a fantastical religious element into medical treatment. Twitcherooby-doo has been trying to educate Americans about her legacy with reference to Roe v. Wade and the midterms. Yes, because Dr. Savita Halappanavar's life and her early unnecessary death has implications for all women whose lives are put in danger by the shackling of medical professionals in various Republican-governed states in the South, but also, is there any in the Midwest? I won't read out now, but there are various states where abortion laws, anti-choice laws have gone into effect that make it medically contentious, legally contentious, and so consequently medically contentious. Should the doctors treat a woman who's bleeding or make her sit in the lobby or send her home? Is hemorrhaging sufficient? Has somebody got a fever sufficient to say that they are at risk of death? Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Twitcherooby-doo, and Eric and August. Thank you all for your presence today. Please keep on having those conversations with people in your social sphere. I saw someone on Twitter say they had conversations with service personnel they encountered. I mean, when you talk to people with respect, they're more likely to listen. And service people are often ignored or just not engaged with because people are busy and people are focused on themselves. But if we can expand that focus on ourselves right now and expand that focus to include people we encounter and to take the time. I'm sure Bob does this as well, and Bob's talked to his nephew and other people and helped them register to vote and impressed upon them the dire need to vote to preserve democracy, to preserve the ability of the people to vote in future elections, to have their votes counted by officials who are committed to the rule of law. Really, we're voting to preserve the rule of law in the United States in this election, because Republican dominance in the American sphere has caused there to be delayed investigation of Trump crimes and delayed indictment of Trump crimes and prosecution. Trump has rendered himself almost above the law through his intimidation tactics, through his running for office as a strategy to avoid legal consequences, as a strategy to intimidate the Attorney General of the United States out of being able to prosecute him for evidently indictable crimes of theft of government documents, including top secret and classified documents, consequential documents from the office after leaving office, all in furtherance of his own false claims to have won the presidency, to still, in a way, be president of the United States. He's not allowed to steal. And there should be legal consequences for him, but he's avoided it so far. Cybergrief is here and says, hi, Dovecat. Hi, Cybergrief. Nice to see you. It's been lovely. I encourage you to watch the replay, because I've talked for an hour and I should get out of here. Wow, the New York Times, I'm going to close with this, has ignored years of explicit political activity by white preachers pushing Republican candidates across the United States. They're now focusing on the questions around the legality of a black pastor who said Herschel Walker was a bad person, and they needed a runner, not a walker, because Republicans, he said white men had told Herschel Walker what to do his whole life, where to go to school, what to eat, where to live, and they had now shunted him into Georgia in the hope that black voters were sufficiently gullible that they would take this worst caricature of a broken black man, he said, and vote for him. I don't even think they were hoping to attract the black vote that much. I think they were hoping to raise the enthusiasm of white voters eager to hide their racism, eager to whitewash their own racism, and to vote for an anti-black candidate who would do the bidding of white Republican donors and vote for policies that would end Social Security and end Medicaid and hurt a lot of Black Americans and white Americans as well, but they are keen to hurt Black Americans as much as possible, because they don't think them deserving of social safety nets. They want to relegate them to tiered society in which it's harder for Black people to get jobs, and they're more grateful to get jobs with poor conditions and poor benefits. And they want there to be more white people in power who will preserve the loophole of the 13th Amendment that says slavery is no longer legal except in the circumstances of people convicted of crimes, which incentivizes racism within the American justice system to find as many Black people as possible guilty of crimes so that they can continue the practice of slavery, of deriving profit from unpaid labor of Black people for as long and to as great an extent as possible. Yes. I hope you enjoyed today's broadcast. Thank you, everybody. Take care, and I hope to see you soon. Please, if you want to volunteer to help with turn out the vote efforts, I've been making calls as well. You can sign up. The website is mobilize.us. Punch that into your internet search engine. Have a look, because you can go to a map. You can choose where you live in America. You can find events local to you, or just other events which are phone events. There's training. There's a script You'll be on a Zoom call and they discuss how you go through it. You can ask whatever questions you have, and then you read off a script. The screen brings up calls for you. You just press begin call, and then you say, hello, I'm calling as a volunteer for so-and-so's campaign. Can they count on your support? And they would like to know what's important to you. You have a script, you go down, there's like, if they say education is important to me, you read, blah, 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 believes this for education. And the candidate will have pre-approved all these statements. So you're not being left to say things off your own bat or be creative. You can just deliver a script in which you encourage people you're helping to raise the profile of candidates. So let me just bring that up on screen. Mobilize.us. We'll put you in touch with all manner of things. Okay. And that's going to be the useful thing I do today, is show you this website. You can put in a shift. Look, phone bank for Democrats in battleground states. Phone bank for Democrats. You can make calls for North Carolina, for New Hampshire. Choose wherever you like. Providence. This is near me because I'm in Massachusetts, but look. Ohio Democrats, California. There'll be something for Arizona. Look, mission for Arizona. Look, Christopher, something you could do. Yeah, they can't find any events near me because I'm not in Arizona, but you can. Look, get out the vote canvas. This is the moment. So it should be a function of our urgency. If we appreciate that this moment is urgent, that we are in danger, then you can use that into transmute that urgency into action. So yay, do that. Take care, everybody, and see you later. Mobilize.us.